From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today has been provided by the following. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont. Online at wvhtf.org. Connecting West Virginia families and businesses through high-speed internet services. Learn more about connecting at frontier.com.
At the Legislature today, the House Speaker invites a gun manufacturer to move its operations to West Virginia as the Maryland legislature considers tough new gun laws. And we'll wrap up our week-long look at education reform with representatives from the West Virginia Education Association on the Legislature today. Good evening, I'm Beth Voorhees. As the second full week of the legislative session came to an end today, the Senate saw the introduction of a variety of bills. One would change a statute already in state code to further protect children from abuse and neglect. Another would continue a pilot program that helped fund the campaign of the newest justice on the state Supreme Court of Appeals. Ashton Mara explains.
Senate Bill 404 adds a truancy aspect to the state's current statute defining a neglected or abused child. Senate Judiciary Committee Chair and one of the 7 bill sponsors, Senator Corey Palumbo of Kanawha County, explains.
It basically just adds to the definition of a neglected child, a child who's presumed healthy but habitually absent from school, so a truant child. So someone who is healthy but not going to school on a regular basis can be considered a neglected child for the purposes of an abuse and neglect hearing.
The bill specifically says those habitual absences must be without good cause and provides an exemption for children being homeschooled. Senate Education Committee Vice Chair Senator Eric Wells, also of Kanawha County, says he agrees with the added definition. He says a child not receiving an education is a child whose future is essentially being taken away.
I think it is important to realize that when parents do not have their children go to school, you are neglecting them. You're neglecting the fact that they need an education, they need to have a livelihood, and by not forcing them to go to school when they need to be going to school, parents are neglecting their parental responsibilities, and that's having an impact on their children's future.
Wells has taken on the issue of truancy before. Last year, he began to talk with fellow members about introducing a bill that would take away the driver's license of a parent who had a habitually absent child. He says the bill was never introduced for lack of support, but brought attention to the issue and showed that they were taking truancy seriously. Wells says this new bill also helps put the issue in the spotlight, but admits it is a difficult one to take on legislatively. Wells says while a parent's influence over a child may change as they progress through school, he hopes that teaching the importance of attendance early on will help those children in the future.
A parent can control what takes place in their child's life when that child is in elementary school. They are the deciding factor in what takes place in that child's life. But once the child gets into middle school and high school, oftentimes a parent has difficulty controlling the behavior of that child. So we realize that if we can get the issue early on and realize the importance for the child and their family to make sure they continue to stay in school, we might be able to break that cycle, and that's the goal we're trying to do.
Palumbo agreed. A child who is continually absent in elementary school has the potential to continue that trend throughout their educational career.
It's really a difficult problem, and it's hard to, solve from a legislative perspective. Courts have done good things with it, but what we do all realize is kids who are truant at a young age are more likely to drop out of school, and kids that drop out of school are more likely to end up in our prison system. So addressing this as best we can early and on the front end really improves outcomes on the back end.
Wells says truancy will be an issue senators will look to take on throughout this session. He says education reform can help by incorporating a variety of learning styles to engage children who learn at different rates. Another bill introduced today would authorize the continuation of a campaign funding program that helped to successfully elect one of our current justices of the state Supreme Court of Appeals. Senate Bill 413 maintains the Supreme Court of Appeals public campaign funding pilot program. Senate President Jeff Kessler says the program began as a way to fund the campaign for justices with taxpayer dollars, so they don't have to depend on the private sector. Kessler says it's a way to keep our justices from appearing partisan to the public by accepting funding from a particular group or organization.
It helps to isolate and take the money out of the system, and so that particularly the perception of the public, again, is that these candidates for judicial office, who will ultimately making decisions that affect our residents, corporations, our businesses, etc., are not being unduly influenced by the role that money or contributors play in their campaign.
Newly elected Justice Alan Lawfrey participated in the program and received $400,000 in public funding for his successful campaign. Kessler says the passage of this bill would authorize the program to continue through the next election in 2016, when one seat on the High Court is up for election. For the Legislature Today, I'm Ashton Mara in the Senate.
A gun control measure currently moving through Maryland's legislature has prompted House Speaker Rick Thompson to invite the firearms maker Beretta to relocate to West Virginia. Dave Mistich reports on this development as well as two bills that went up for passage in the House today.
After Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley announced he plans to institute some of the nation's strictest gun licensing requirements and a ban on assault weapons, gun manufacturer Beretta responded by saying that they are considering relocating. House Speaker Rick Thompson announced yesterday that he sent a letter to the company and invited them to consider West Virginia as a new base of operations.
Well, I think the most important thing we can do here in the legislature when we have an opportunity is look for opportunities that will create jobs in West Virginia. We need to get our people back to work and have more jobs, more good quality paying jobs in West Virginia. So when I saw that this company was thinking about relocating, I thought I would send a message to them that I'd like to meet with them or something just to see if they were interested in West Virginia. We think it's a great place to do business, and so I wanted to have that opportunity. I do not believe that West Virginia would be like Maryland and consider that proposed legislation, and I'd like to convey that to them and see if they're interested in coming to West Virginia to create those jobs.
In the letter to Executive Vice President Franco Beretta, Speaker Thompson mentioned West Virginia's high gun ownership rate as well as the state's proximity to the company's current location. The House also considered two bills for passage, including House Bill 2314, which would authorize a family court judge to order a child to be taken into custody in emergency situations. Delegate Tim Manchin of Marion County outlines the bill.
There are provisions in existing law that requires that when the family court judge sees something during their proceedings that cause them to suspect that a child is neglected or abused, or conditions that are likely to lead to abuse or neglect, that they're to advise the DHHR within 48 hours of those circumstances. This bill will change that in the sense that it will allow the family court in certain circumstances to actually authorize and order emergency custody.
House Bill 2487, which would prohibit the use of Laetrile, an ineffective and sometimes detrimental cancer treatment, was also up for passage. Delegate Barbara Fleischauer of Monongalia County details that piece of legislation.
This bill repeals Section 16(5A)(9)A. If passed, the bill will have the effect of prohibiting the use of Laetrile as a form of last resort cancer treatment in West Virginia. Multiple clinical studies have shown Laetrile to have no observed medical benefits, and it has been known to cause cyanide poisoning. The FDA has banned Laetrile sales since 1977, except in states where it's specifically allowed. I urge passage.
Both House Bill 2314 and 2487 passed with a 98-0 vote. House Bill 2586, relating to the qualifications for a license to practice embalming, will be on its third reading on Monday. For the Legislature Today, I'm Dave Mistich in the House of Delegates.
In a moment, we'll wrap up our week-long look at Senate Bill 359, the governor's education reform bill. But first, here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the Senate today. Among the bills introduced in the Senate today, Senate Bill 405, relating to preventing taxpayer subsidization of health insurance covering elective abortions, prohibiting all qualified health plans offered through a state exchange from including abortion coverage except to prevent the death of the mother, and preventing all other health plans, including health insurance contracts, plans, or policies offered outside of the exchange but within the state from providing coverage for elective abortions except by optional separate supplemental coverage. Senate Bill 408 to allow a private owner, leasee, or other person charged with the control of real property to prohibit the carrying of any firearm or deadly weapon on private property under his or her domain. Senate Bill 409 to create a funding ratio of 350 to 1 of students and school counselors. Senate Bill 413 to remove language that violates the United States Constitution. The bill makes the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals public campaign financing pilot program permanent. Up for passage in the Senate on Monday, Senate Bill 172 to authorize trusts to be applicants for a non-intoxicating beer distributor license and to add limited liability companies to the definition of person in the Non-Intoxicating Beer Act. On second reading, Senate Bill 47 to revise the antiquated stock laws of West Virginia. Senate Bill 194 to repeal the purchasing exemption provided to the Medicaid program. Senate Bill 214 to clarify the requirements for obtaining a license to practice medicine and surgery or podiatry by making personal interviews of applicants optional at the discretion of the Board of Medicine. Senate Bill 335 to permit certain hospitals to request an exemption from certificates of need for healthcare facilities in specific instances. And Senate Bill 338 to codify existing common law in West Virginia as it relates to the duty of care possessors of property owe trespassers. On the West Virginia Education Association's website, there is a statement written in large red lettering that reads, "Sadly, instead of education reform, it is simply another attack on teachers," referring to Senate Bill 359. Joining us tonight are leaders of the WVEA. President Dale Lee has been teaching for 22 years. He's currently on a leave of absence from teaching special education at Princeton Senior High School. And David Haney is the executive director and has been with the WVEA since 1978. Gentlemen, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
All right, so first of all, for anyone that is not a teacher or doesn't have a teacher in the family, hiring issues for teachers, for those of us on the outside of it, can be a little confusing. So, with that said, let's start with what this bill does in regards to hiring.
Right now there's two sets of criteria when you're considering a vacancy. One for people already in the system, and the second when no one in the system applies. In the first set of criteria, the misconception out there is that seniority is the deciding factor. It's one of 7 criteria. The criteria are experience in the field, certification level, degree level, good evaluations in the past, other measures as described in the job posting. And so it becomes a fact that you're looking at the most qualified based on those 7 set of criteria. Too many times administrators don't want to do the job or don't want to give the reason, as the statute says, if the most senior person is not hired, and say our hands are tied because of seniority, when in fact it's not.
Does this bill change that criteria?
This bill eliminates the second set of criteria and adds seniority to the first set of criteria, which also includes things like academic achievement, and it makes it really more open-ended because it adds a category of other where county boards can put anything they want in the other, and it's not weighted so that they can make anything have more weight in it and the determining factor.
Beth, you have to remember that this criteria was established since I've been around for a few years. Was in the early 90s when we had some real problems with actually the hiring was done based upon nepotism and cronyism. I've had teachers actually tell me I was hired, I was never interviewed by anyone, I was hired because of who my husband knew. And the point was that back then we did have real problems with that. So these criteria, these 7 separate steps in this criterion system was established specifically to make sure that we found the best and most qualified person. No one's yet shown us why the criteria that exists today that we use does not find the best and the most qualified person to fill any open position.
Is this the attack on teachers that you refer to, or how does this bill attack teachers?
Well, this is one of the attacks, taking away the faculty senate time and the opportunity for teachers to collaborate together and make some decisions that will help the school, the school calendar, and making it so broad that teachers have no knowledge of when the school is actually going to end. Those are just several of the examples of the attacks on teachers in this bill.
Do you have anything to add in regards to what this bill does and how it attacks teachers?
Well, I think what's been going on for the last several years is this, and it's not necessarily in this bill, but it has happened over a period of time where it's almost like anybody can be a teacher. And it's to diminish the profession and the people who are in the profession who go to work every day, working really hard, wanting the students that they have to perform and to succeed. And this constant bashing of teachers, I think, has had a huge impact on the morale of teachers across the state, and we got to find some way to stop that. I'm sorry, Dale.
And I wanted to add in, Beth, this bill does very little to address education reform that is student-centered, that should be centered around student achievement. We had 7 forums. The WVEA had 7 forums across the state after the Vision Shared forums. And they were facilitated by an outside group, actually the same group that did the Vision Shared. And we listened to the experts of public education, the teachers and service professionals who deal with the kids every day. They came up with a list. While the Vision Shared forums didn't come to any conclusions, our forums actually did. And we said that if you would do these things, you would increase student achievement. Things such as develop strategies to reduce the standardized testing, collaboration time for teachers. Of course, no one wants to hear it, but increasing pay so that we're attracting quality teachers into the profession. Not instituting a merit pay system, strategies for parental involvement, and dealing with our truancy issue, which is huge in West Virginia. Those are things that we know will actually improve student achievement. We were hoping this bill would include those things, and yet it doesn't.
Have you spoken with the governor, the House Speaker, the Senate President, the chairs of the education committees about your concerns, and what is their reaction?
We've had ongoing meetings. Matter of fact, we met with some of the governor's folks today, as well as individuals in the Senate earlier today, and we will continue to do that. We want to develop legislation that will, in fact, improve student performance and have elements of real educational reform. So we will continue down that path and to carry our message to the governor, to the Senate leaders, and the House leaders.
What's good about the bill?
Well, there are some good things that we can work on there. The early childhood, the getting students involved by the 4-year-old with some tweaking that can work. The emphasis on having kids reading at grade level by 3rd grade, that's really good. But there's contradictions in the bill because it strengthens the preparation programs to emphasize reading for teachers going into the K-3. It adds that teachers that are in those positions will do additional staff development to emphasize the reading. But in the same token, it turns around and allows for a Teach for America program where someone with 5 weeks training could go into these kindergarten classes and teach. So the contradictions are abound in this legislation.
You know, both the governor and the superintendent of schools have said, don't blame the teachers and the administrators for our lack of student achievement. Don't blame the teachers and the administrators. Do you think this bill blames the teachers or punishes them in some way?
Well, I think that it actually doesn't get to the core issues, and that's looking at student achievement. And some of these things that we've talked about earlier has an attack on teachers and continues that attack on teachers. We're not addressing the poverty issue in West Virginia. And the number of our kids, more than 50% of our kids are on free and reduced lunch. And that has an adverse effect on student achievement. Teachers are doing a tremendous job. I'm one of the luckiest people in the state. I get to travel all over and see the great things happening, and they're doing a tremendous job. They're not satisfied either, and they want to do the things that will improve education, like we said.
I know we will continue talking with you throughout this session as this bill moves through. David Haney and Dale Lee with the West Virginia Education Association, thank you very much.
Thank you, Beth.
And here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the House today. Among the bills introduced in the House today, House Bill 2766 to create the West Virginia Winner Program to promote healthy living and improve lifestyle and increase longevity of West Virginia residents by competing in various athletic and cultural events in the 55 counties. The bill provides that the program be administered by the Office of Healthy Lifestyles. House Bill 2768 to provide for the regulation of tanning facilities. House Bill 2769 to give priority registration to veterans at state institutions of higher education and encourage the establishment of resource centers. House Bill 2774 to authorize the immediate removal from office a municipal officer convicted of a crime and incarcerated, and if the crime is a felony, to render the municipal officer unable to hold a public office again. House Bill 2779 to create the West Virginia Native American Tribes Unique Recognition, Authentication, and Listing Act. House Bill 2785 to authorize electronic collection and enforcement of tolls. House Bill 2787 to permit family court judges and magistrates to carry concealed handguns without a permit. House Bill 2788 to require that all attorneys employed by the state of West Virginia in legal positions paying $100,000 or more must have a license to practice law in the state at the time of hire. House Bill 2792 to create a hunting license permitting crossbow hunting. House Bill 2794 to prohibit insurance companies from declining or terminating property insurance based solely upon an applicant's possession of a certain breed of dog. The bill provides an exception if the dog has a history of biting people. House Bill 2798 to provide for the issuance of special license plates stating Second Amendment. There is one bill on third reading on Monday, House Bill 2586, to remove the requirement that an applicant for a license to practice embalming complete college courses before beginning a one-year apprenticeship and before graduating from mortuary school. The requirements remain the same, but do not have to be achieved in a particular order. There appears to be a battle of wills between Attorney General Patrick Morrisey and some members of the House of Delegates. In our bill list just now, we noted the introduction of House Bill 2788, requiring that attorneys hired by the state making over $100,000 a year be licensed to practice in the state at the time of the hire. When the Attorney General heard about this bill, he issued the following statement. Shame on Delegate Doug Reynolds and his 10 co-sponsors who introduced House Bill 2788 today. This is petty partisan politics at its worst and shows what certain delegates' priorities are. This has to do with the hiring of Albert Lynn, a Washington, D.C. attorney who works at the Attorney General's office but is not licensed to practice law here. The Attorney General goes on to say, this bill shows blatant hostility toward any highly qualified legal professional who wants to come to West Virginia to practice. It demonstrates a total lack of understanding about the processes of bar admission and how lawyers get hired. Even the American Bar Association recently adopted a model ethics rule that allows previously out-of-state lawyers to practice in a state for up to a year while they seek reciprocity or admission to the state bar. Well, this has been the Legislature Today. We'll be back on Monday with complete coverage of legislative news and information from the first regular session of the 81st West Virginia Legislature. Next week, our topic will be prison overcrowding. We leave you tonight with the African drum sounds by students from the Greenbrier Academy for Girls in Pent Springs. I'm Beth Voorhees. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Support for the Legislature Today has been provided by the following. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont. Online at wvhtf.org. Connecting West Virginia families and businesses through high-speed internet services. Learn more about connecting at frontier.com.